On October 2nd, 1842, a group of 10 men met on a Sunday afternoon to discuss forming a Universalist society in Racine, and that society was the beginning of our church. After a week of investigating the statutes to determine how to legally form a religious society in the territory of Wisconsin, the first Universalist Society of Racine was created. At this time in history, Wisconsin was still a territory, not a state. Wisconsin became a state in 1848, so in 1842, Racine was part of the Wisconsin Territory. 10 might seem like a small number of people to start a religious society, but in 1842, there were roughly 1,000 people living in Racine. Actually, Racine wasn't even a city then. It became a village on February 13, 1841, and on August 5, 1848, an incorporated city. So, by those standards, 10 people was a large assembly. Racine was quite different in 1842 than it is now. This was the city. Everything past these streets was pretty much wilderness, prairie, and to the west a few farms. They didn't hold church services during the winter, so the first church service was held on March 25, 1843, in the courthouse. To give you an idea of how different life was in Racine in 1842, I'm going to read you some descriptions of Racine given by Melissa Perkins. Melissa Perkins was the wife of George Perkins, whom was one of the 10 who met to begin our church. This is the Perkins window inside the church. In 1910, Melissa Perkins turned 90 years old, and the Racine Journal-Times interviewed her for a newspaper article. Here's what she said. "You asked me when I came here how things looked. I came here in 1839, and it was pretty much a wilderness then. There were but a few dwellings above 6th Street then. There were both log houses and frame houses. The logs were not hewn. We built on the corner of 6th and Wisconsin Streets, and that building has been recently moved back and may not yet be seen. A log house stood where the post office is now, and a frame house opposite here on Main Street, and one log house about on Main Street, 9th Street. That was all the houses south of 6th Street then. The lighthouse stood on the corner of 7th Street, on the bank of the lake where Mrs. Dawson now lives. It had a revolving light. This lighthouse Mrs. Perkins was talking about was located where the library is now. There were farmers out around in the country, and they came in with their grain and produce, and what is now Monument Square was used as a marketplace for the farmers to come and sell food. Food was not as high as it is now. We could get eggs at 3 cents a dozen. The wood was full of game. Prairie chickens were everywhere, and the sloughs were full of ducks. My husband was quite a hunter, and would go out and get a wagon load of prairie chickens in half a day. Mr. Perkins would go ahead with the gun and dog and scare up the chickens and shoot them, and I would go after with wagon and team and gather them up and distribute them to those who wanted. By 1846, our church had grown to 45 men and 20 women, so they hired their first minister. The congregation met for services in people's homes, in the schoolhouse, and the courthouse. The church existed as a liberal community and attracted many of the city's industrial and financial leaders. In 1849, the members of our church purchased a lot of land on Main Street, and our first church was built and then dedicated on October 9, 1852. At the church annual meeting on May 25, 1856, was the first reference to the church building being called Church of the Good Shepherd, with the congregation continuing to be known as the First Universalist Society of Racine. This is a map of Racine County. In 1858, the reason I'm showing you this map is because on the right side are small drawings of buildings in Racine. One of them is the Church of the Good Shepherd, our first church. This photo is of Monument Square in 1870. If you look to the left side, you can see our church's steeple and the shepherd's crook that we still have on top of our church today. Our history continues with a lot of money problems, Olympia Brown becoming our minister and then leaving to work to get women the right to vote. And in 1891, because of money problems, the church on Main Street was sold to a hotel company for $9,000, and the bell was taken out of the tower and the church torn down. In 1892, the bell was sold to Grace Lutheran Church for $300. Also in that year, the congregation decided to buy land for a new centrally located church at the corner of College Avenue and 7th Street. The new church was built and dedicated in 1895 as the Church of the Good Shepherd. The building was enlarged a year later and is the church we know and love today.